Good evening and welcome to today's Tropics for July 30th, 2020. Please note I am not a meteorologist and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storm I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at tropical storm Isaias, and it's gotten considerably more well organized today. It did form last night in the Caribbean, and that low level center traveled up into the Caribbean, except it started weakening as it didn't have as much of the convective support, and you had a mid-level low that came off of Puerto Rico here and into the Mona Passage, and that mid-level low helped spawn what seems to be a low-level center or on the north coast of Hispaniola and Dominican Republic here, and pressures are getting pretty low there. There's some surface observations that are suggesting that the pressure has actually fallen down below 1,000 millibars. So it seems that Isaias is trying to become more organized and quickly. However, the position or exact position of the center isn't quite certain. We have a few observations, but they don't really tell a picture of where exactly that low is. And without any nearby radar or recon in the storm, which seems to have been canceled because it's too close to land. It doesn't seem like we'll quite know where exactly that low is, but you can see that there is a mid-level low here, spinning pretty obviously, and that's where the low-level center is trying to form. But we'll have to see what happens in the near term, especially with this here. This deep convective burst has a lot of lightning in it and might be signaling something's trying to go on under there. Luckily, for forecasting purposes, it seems that a lot of the uncertainty that we're dealing with the past few days is starting to get resolved now. But there's one major block here, and that's how it's going to interact with the mountains and generally the landmass of Hispaniola. So, we'll have to see how it ends up after that, and then by then it'll start looking a little clearer, and hopefully we'll have a better idea of what Isaias is eventually going to actually do. Looking at the water vapor, you can see that right now Isaias is currently pretty decently ventilated. You can see that there's some outflow to the north, so that and to the east. So that is suggesting, at the moment at least, that there is a healthy anticyclone. But you notice lurking nearby is some northeasterly winds loft, and between that you have an upper trough along with some dry air, and that's going to be a feature in the forecast for Isaias. You can actually see the dry air influencing the storm right now. You've got a few of these outflow boundaries here, suggesting that some thunderstorms have collapsed, and that is due to dry air. So it does seem that maybe Isaias tries to shrink down a little because of that dry air, but I'll have to see. It's still a large storm, though, so it can take a bit of that dry air without getting it into the actual developing core, if there ends up being, or if there ends up being one. As Isaias travels away from the coast of Hispaniola, we'll finally start getting a better idea of what it is actually going to do. But there are a few kinks in the forecast, as with pretty much all of them, and that is what does it look like at first, and how can it survive the moderately unfavorable conditions that will exist around the Bahamas area. So here's tomorrow or afternoon. You can see that there's that upper trough that I was talking about earlier, and then there's a large upper ridge to the east of Isaias at the time, and you can see in this area between the trough and the upper anticyclone, there is an area of southerly wind aloft, and with the movement to the west-northwest or northwest, you end up getting a more southwesterly vector, and so you're probably going to end up seeing some moderate southwesterly shear, but it really depends on if Isaias can actually get itself to ventilate its own outflow better and build a bit of an anticyclone over itself, so that maybe it can resist some of that southerly shear that is going to try to hurt the storm structure. And at the same time, again, there's still that dry air lurking around, especially to the southwest. And if there's dry air to the southwest and you get shear from the southwest, you end up getting dry air trying to get infected right into the circulation. And that is obviously not healthy. So if it's a weaker storm, we'll end up seeing it get sheared off, and it's probably going to have a hard time actually getting convection over the center. So it's probably going to weaken in this area in the Bahamas. But if is able to build an inner core in the next day or two, then might be able to resist the shear that will be hitting it, and maybe it'll be able to wrap some convection up shear and moisten the column in that area, and that would mean that dryer would be less of a problem. It'd still be maybe a minor problem, but with an inner core, it'd be able to wall off a lot of that drier air and maybe become a stronger storm and probably resist those conditions and become a lot stronger than if it is unable to do that. If Isaias is indeed over water at this time, we'll have to see how it interacts with the oncoming trough as it tries to recurve, because this one frame of the GFS here shows pretty decent uh, jet interaction here. We have some strong southwesterly winds aloft, and this generally shows that over the system, but it's weaker, and given that it's trying to recurve, it's also moving to the northeast, and that is in phase with that upper level wind. So that likely means it won't be dealing with a lot of shear here, but it'll also have an outflow channel, so it might be able to intensify if it is not over land at this point. But I'll have to see if it is favorable or not, depending on how it is configured. But as a result of the conditions a bit further south, it's likely we're not going to see much of a middle ground of the system intensity once it's in the Bahamas and near Florida, just because there are two major scenarios: whether stays relatively weak and struggles in the conditions that are generally unfavorable for it, so you have a very weak system in this area, or you have a system that's able to build an inner core, and if it is able to do that and not get disrupted, then it might be able to intensify or at least stay steady state in that area, and that'd be a lot stronger than that weaker storm that is unable to build an inner core. So it's likely we'll see either maybe a very weak tropical cyclone or a hurricane possibly in this area, but we'll really have to see. And the trends in the next day or so will be definitely very crucial to see if the intensity towards the end. Isaias's strength in the next couple of days will also be important to see how it tracks, because looking at the lower levels, this is sort of level a bit lower though, that you'd see a weaker storm be steered by, and you can see it's generally more in west northwesterly flow, and it's faster. So a weaker Isaias would travel faster along this ridge, and also a bit more to the south, so be able to penetrate further west before the trough starts to try to pick it up, and that would mean it's more of a threat to land masses such as Florida and more of the east coast, but that at the same time would be a weaker storm most likely. So likely it won't be a stronger storm coming, being more likely to come further west. But if you look towards the more upper level type flow, you see it's a bit more northwesterly rather than the west northwesterly that is lower down. And at the same time, you're not seeing that as fast flow, so it might travel a bit more to the northwest, as I said just earlier, and slower. So that means it wouldn't have as much time to actually get closer to Florida and further west, and possibly the east coast. If it is going slower and stronger, unfortunately, that would mean it would spend longer over the Bahamas, especially possibly the northern Bahamas, which really don't need another hurricane strike after last year's Dorian. So hopefully it is maybe a bit weaker, and hopefully avoids this kind of area. But at the same time, going back to the shear, remember this anticyclone, if it is a bit slower, it might be located closer to this area, so it might even have less shear in general, depend even without an inner core. So definitely that slower flow would be more favorable for it if it's already stronger. But we'll really have to see. So it definitely looks like the stronger the storm is, the more likely it is to uh, avoid places like Florida and the East Coast, though the East Coast should still keep an eye on the storm, and a weaker storm would likely make landfall further west and maybe not even come onto the water out here. But we'll really have to see because this is still a forecast and there can still be forecast errors. The ensembles of both the Euro model and the GFS model show this quite well now, where you have all the weaker systems traveling further to the west as they're traveling faster. So you see this clump of weaker ensembles out in the Gulf on the Euro ensemble. At the same time, you have the stronger storms travel more north, slower, and as a result, don't have as much time to really get further west before the trough starts to pick it up, which is even felt by stronger storms as well. And so you can see this definite divergence between weak and strong, weak west and strong to the east. There's also agreement on the GFS ensemble, so definitely it does look like the stronger the storm will be, the more likely it'll be further to the east. But don't let your guard down if you're on the coast, because it does look like some land impact on the east coast is getting harder to avoid. So keep your eyes on this because there are errors in the models and errors in the initializations, and there's some data we just don't have. So a small shift or in speed or ridge positioning or strength or trough strength could definitely change things so that maybe it trends back west possibly or trends east. But definitely keep your eye on the forecast, no matter what, or no matter how far it tries to trend east, unless it is a very near-term forecast. Looking at the official National Hurricane Center track forecast, you can see it indeed tries to get further west and approaches Florida in this forecast, but it does recurve near the coast. So it's basically, again, taking the middle. It's a bit stronger now because the forecast has trended stronger, given that there's still an actual low-level vorticity around here on the north side of Hispaniola. But the impacts are coming soon or are already occurring for some of these places. Like if you are in the Dominican Republic or especially northern Haiti, definitely be prepared for those heavy rains, possibly flooding rains, almost occurring or occurring very soon. Also in the Turks and Caicos here. And then very soon we'll likely see that happen in the Bahamas as it tracks into the Bahamas, and you'll likely have some high winds and maybe some very heavy rain. And again, depending on how it might shift, there are tropical storm warning or watches for the east coast of Florida too. So keep your eye on that, and remember, this is a large storm, and even if it shrinks a little bit, you're going to see those impacts outside the actual center. So even if the center passes offshore of you, you might still get those impacts. So still be prepared, even if it doesn't look like the center will hit you. And again, those on a lot of the East Coast, you definitely keep an eye on the storm because you might see some impacts, especially if you live in North Carolina, which kind of sticks out into the ocean, and there you may have impacts, but the timing is a bit more uncertain depending on how fast it comes, and just a lot of variables. So definitely keep an eye on the storm early week if you are on the east coast north of Florida. And again, be prepared for the worst case scenario, but hope for the best case scenario so that you don't end up getting damages already this early in the season. Otherwise, There isn't a whole lot going on the tropics. There are a couple of invests in the West Pacific. There's Invest 93L right near Africa, between Africa and Cabo Verde Islands. And we'll have to see if that develops. It's starting to look a little worse right now, but otherwise there isn't too much going on in the tropics. If you have any questions or comments about my video, please let me know. Thanks for watching.